So in this video, we're going to talk about strings and string handling. So strings are a type of variable that you may not be as familiar with, right? Like we see numeric values and numeric variables in algebra and in our mathematics classes, but you may not have thought about strings or lines of text as variables. But that's what strings are. Strings are variables that are basically text. They can be used in different ways than numeric variables, and they cannot be used in mathematical calculations, as we talked about last time. If you try to use a subtraction or division or multiplication, like that's not going to make any sense to the computer. They can be used in identity comparisons. So you could say, is a string equal to a value or not equal to a value? So in other words, a binary comparison, yes or no, true or false. But they can't be used in relative comparisons, like is this string greater or less than that string? There's absolutely no frame of reference for a computer to make that kind of calculation. Now you could say, is the length of one string relatively larger or smaller than another, and that is often a useful thing to do. So you can do that with the length, but remember, that's like basically taking an element of the string and turning it into a number that you can then do number things with, right? But strings themselves, you can't say greater than, less than, but you can say equal to, not equal to. And in JavaScript, there are many useful methods for string handling. And string handling, that's just the terminology that we use for talking about using strings and expressions. So in with numeric values like number handling, that's basically math. That's our normal arithmetic that we do all the time. String handling has its own name because that just means the types of things we can do to strings and the way we can put strings into expressions to do some different things with them. So some of the string handling properties and methods, I'm just going to go over them, and then we'll look at some code and we'll actually do some coding and do some string handling. So toString converts a number to a string, and this can be very useful if you want to start using that number as a string, and sometimes you're definitely going to want to do that. And we'll see that later with coding. So for example, I just want you to know and just understand that this variable, or your x variable equal to 34, is different from this. So in the first case, that's a number. In the second case, that's a string. Because we put it in quotation marks, that means that x in the second case is a string. ToString would allow you to take that first line of code and turn it into essentially that second line of code. .length returns the length of a string, and we'll see an example of that in code. So that's a property rather than a method, and you can tell by the little dot. So when you stick that .length on a string variable, then that will actually turn it into the number that represents the length of the string. Index of and search are used to find specific strings within a string. So if you've got a string and you're looking for a part of it, you can use index of to find where it starts, and search can also return that number. They're a little bit different in that index of, you can start searching at a certain part of a string. So if you got a really long string, you can cut down the processing time by starting to look at a certain spot if you know that, in fact. And with search, that one, you actually can search for some more complex, like you could search for an expression within that, within what you're passing within the parameter that you're passing to the search. We don't need to get into those specifications. We're going to use index of in an example that we're going to do in a second. And then slice and substring are very useful. They extract parts of a string. So they're different in that slice, you give it the start and end that you want to slice out, and substring, you give it the start and then how much of the string you want. And if you leave that length parameter blank, then it will just give you the whole rest of the string. And we'll see some examples of that in a second. And then finally, replace. You can actually replace a specific substring with another string. Remember, when we're talking about things like finding, searching, and replacing, all these things, we have to be very precise. It is case sensitive, so we have to look for the exact thing, even including uppercase, lowercase, that we want in order to find it or to replace it. And then of course, when it replaces, it will replace exactly with however you have that string formatted. So let's go ahead and look at some code examples. So here we are in our next code page. This one I have try string values just to help us keep track of where we are. Same deal with our template where I have just a variable and an alert set up for us, a little button so that we can see what we're doing. Now, obviously, in this case, we're going to be using string variables. So let's go ahead and assign a value to X that is, this typical sentence is used in typing classes because it includes every single letter in the alphabet. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Okay, so that is our string value. Let's just say we have another sentence here. And then the fox got away. Now we've got our variable z, it is all defined for us. So let's go ahead and create an expression, z equals x plus y. Remember, like I told you, plus is the only thing we can use with our strings for it to make sense to the computer. And so then z, notice what happened here, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, and then the fox got away, and it's all smooshed together, right? So that's close to what we may have envisioned. But notice we actually would have to do something like this to get it to really do what I think we have in mind. And notice all I did was I'm adding a space using another plus sign. I'm adding a space. So here is a literal, right? We've got a couple of variables. And then we also have this literal value right here. It's a value of a space. It's in quotation marks. And so that's how we're able to add it. And then we get a little bit of spacing in our alert, which is great. That's what we want, okay? So that's easy enough to do. That's how we can, what's called concatenate strings. That is, smoosh them together, put them together to form a larger string. Let's create another variable for ourselves. And I'm just going to initialize it here, and then we can go ahead and use it in our code later on down here. So let's go ahead and say we want to figure out the length of our maybe our two pieces, and then the other the full thing when it's all concatenated together. Let's say that our W, we're going to start out by making it X length, and let's go ahead and report out W. And so now we see W is 45. So the length of the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog and a period is 45. And let's go ahead and change that to Y length. That is 26. So we would assume that Z length, remember, it's going to be X plus Y plus a space, right? So 45 plus 26 plus 1 for our space, 72. So that's what we would be expecting, okay? So that just allows us to see the length of our of a string variable. And as I said, you will be surprised how really useful that is. Let's say we wanted to find a specific word in here. Let's say we're gonna find quick. So what we're basically saying here is W is going to be, we're gonna look in X and we're gonna find the place where quick starts. So the index of the first place, or the location in the string where quick starts, and we'll see what that means in just a second. So it tells us 4. So what it's saying is, so each position in the string, each character in the string is equal to 1 integer spot. But remember, computers start counting from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the position where quick starts, right? So now that we know that that's the spot where quick starts, if we wanted to, we could say, and notice I'm initializing the variable right here as I'm going to use it. Now, normally I would initialize variables at the beginning, but just for the sake of expediency, and this is a small program, so variable A is going to be x.substring starting at W, which is our index where quick starts, right? And remember we talked about substring. It takes the starting index and a length. Now, if we don't put anything in there for length, it should just return the whole rest of the string, but without anything that comes before quick, because we're telling it to start at this index. Okay, so let's test that theory. Okay, and here we get our sentence, quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, but minus the, right? Now, we could also put in a length. Let's go ahead and say, we'll use a literal value there, 10, and it should give us 10 spots, 10 characters starting at the index where quick begins. And we get quick brow, right? We could also do same deal, but slice. So we'll take slice and we'll say that it is again going to start at the beginning of quick and it's going to end at spot 18, right? So it's going to start here. Now notice when you're doing that, you better make sure that this number is larger than this index position, right? So if we put in 3 or 2, the computer wouldn't have known what to do with that, because how can it take a slice that ends before the slice starts, right? That's just not sensible, which if you count it out, comes to about here. So we would expect to get this little, we would expect to get this little slice of our string. Let's see if that works. And that is, in fact, what we get returned. Now, again, you may be saying, why on earth would you want to extract little pieces of strings? Believe me, this is going to come in handy a little bit later, and we may see that with some future programs. But string handling can be just a really, really useful thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of these, and I'm going to use, just to show you, commenting in JavaScript. So just these 2 little forward slashes, what that means is the compiler is going to just jump right over those 2 lines, not going to mean anything. Let's define a little bit differently now. A equals Z replace, and let's replace fox with duck. Okay. So the replace method, actually, again, another string method, it requires 2 parameters, and that is the thing you're looking for, and then the thing you're replacing it with, right? And notice the syntax here. Each string has to be in its quotation marks, and the 2 parameters need to be separated with a comma. Okay, now notice what happened. The quick brown duck jumped over the lazy dog, and then the fox got away. So we did get our replacement, but it only replaced the first fox. By default, replace only replaces the first instance of the string that it looks for. Now, if you want it to replace all, then you actually have to change the string signalers, our quotation marks, change it out for a little bit of extra code that looks like this, G, but the G basically tells it to replace all. And so we're using forward slashes to replace that. So let's go ahead and save it. And now we've got ducks jumping and ducks getting away. So there are other string handling methods. You can go ahead and check those out using the link that's included with this module. But this just gives you a sense of that string handling, putting things together and taking them apart. And these are things that you're going to find as you program, and especially once you start using user input in your programs. It's very useful to sort of trim out extra things that users may include in their inputs and pare it down to just the stuff that you need to run your function. So this just gives you a sense of some of the string handling that you can do in JavaScript.